Welcome and step into the minds of addiction and recovery. Hello, I'm your host, Brett C. It is an honor to bring into light one of the darkest aspects of our society, addiction. With 20 years of active addiction and 20 years of sobriety, I hope to bring together all listeners on a journey of inspiration and education. With my co-hosts Jared F. and Rich J., we will be sharing our experience, strength, and hope for all listeners to enjoy and have fun with. Now, F3 Recovery brings you the Super Sober Podcast. Okay, welcome to our second episode of the Super Sober Podcast. It's going to be me and Rich today. Jared is out right now. His father flew in from out of town, and he's with his little baby and spending precious time doing that. And we wish him all well and happiness and joy with that. And so next week he is scheduled to be with us. So everybody got to know Jared last week. So we're going to continue on as we would always do. We always keep on keeping on here at the Super Sober Podcast, and that will be for sure. And I'm sure in the future, maybe I won't even be able to make it, and then it'll be just Rich and Jared or other guests and stuff like that. So this is definitely a collective podcast, even though I am the host and he's the co-host, and however that title goes, we're going to still just be doing things. It's brothers and sisters and everybody together with the Super Sober Podcast. Just wanted to throw that out there really quick. And wanted to let everybody know we're going to get right into the content. We have some things to introduce. My name is Brett C. My sobriety date is 4/21/03. Through the program, I became an RN, a registered nurse with a bachelor's, and my specialty is in psych and chemical dependency and just all around nursing, basically. I've been doing that for 17 years, and through that and other people sharing with me, that to start this podcast. So we qualified. We didn't do that in the first episode. So it was recommended by our producer that we go ahead and share our professional background and what would qualify us beyond just being sober and taking people through the steps and having an extensive background with active addiction. So go ahead, Rich.
And my name's Rich, and my sobriety date is October 5th, 2013. My background is in 2014, I started working in treatment centers. And then since that time, I actually still work in a treatment center, but about a year ago, I actually started teaching boxing at one of them. And right now, I'm also in nursing school, and so I'm kind of following in the footsteps of Brett here. I graduate next December, and so I'm pretty excited about that. But at the end of the day, I found a love for helping people through recovery. And so I like to have the background, or I'm grateful to have the background of the psychiatric background, but now I'm also getting the medical background, and I'm going to tie the two together. And exciting stuff going on. So that's my qualification.
Yeah, we definitely qualify. And I did that in the intro also, saying that I have 20 years of active addiction and 20 years of recovery. I just celebrating 20 years. What a nostalgic kind of
Yes, sir.
20 years of actually practicing and staying accountable to change. And I appreciate the bros coming out and seeing me take a chip. And it's was super emotional. My mom was there and other people and friends and family. And it was a
Powerful.
great
It was
showing,
powerful. It
a
was
great
amazing.
showing. And I'm just so happy that I've lived this long to do this. So
Mm.
there was a lot of times in our lives that we didn't think we would make it this far, and or even this far in recovery when things are going good. So it's been an honor to serve the medical community and the recovery community,
Yeah.
my family, and everybody. So we're going to move forward right here. We want to introduce something here that came to me, and he's a special new mascot for recovery. I don't know if I've ever even seen a mascot for recovery, but that would be our buddy here, because we all know what active addiction promises us, and that is jails, institutions, and death. And this is our little guy right here. He's sitting next to me over here on the side. So this is showing him. He is the Grim Reaper. For all the audience, I want to give a brief description right here. He's the Grim Reaper in a straitjacket holding a scythe. And that is came to me to represent the jails, institutions, and death. So we all have a visual reminder what's waiting for us, because so many of us, especially these days with all the overdoses and everything. So many people have been to death anyways and have met our little buddy here and still in the game of life. So the first one we show here is our little buddy here at a local institution. And then the next one, he's standing in a prison right here in the middle of the hallway for the ones that don't have a visual on this, but it will also be loaded up on YouTube where you can see a video. And we're currently on Spotify. And then the next picture, let's go to him working out on the yard with the homies. There he is right there. Sometimes he does get some yard time and he's able to hang out and stuff, but he's never able to swing the scythe around and stuff to actually hurt anybody. And he's the only one on the yard that has an active weapon, but he's always in a straitjacket.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna
even, yeah,
say one of my favorite things about him is that straight jacket. No matter which environment he's in, no matter what his outside environment looks like, he's always in the straight jacket.
yeah,
So that to me, that speaks to that spiritual death.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
exactly.
So yeah, yep.
Yeah, there could be a whole bunch of we're excited. So this came to me. I don't know where it came to me. I do a lot of meditating and stuff like that. So I for all I know, I was Googling around and we don't have a mascot. So here we go. Here's our mascot. Hopefully he can take off. We also see him with his magic dragon right here. He's flying through the ether and everything, as you can see right under the wall right here on the Super Sober podcast. That was actually in my mother's case, and she's always been into dragons. So here we are. Here's our little magic dragon guy. He's kicking it back with the jails, institutions, and death. And these will be the first two props.
Well, you might be saying, how does the dragon relate to addiction? And so we can go back to the old saying, chasing the dragon,
Yeah, done a
right?
lot of that.
That's the chasing the dragon. That's the classic saying. So some of us might know about that. Um, but apparently, I was talking to Brett before we started the podcast today, and the logos, the dragon logos, um, on our original logo up there, uh, those were something that Brett came up with during his meditation and added them to the podcast. So that's where the dragon comes from. So if you're sitting there wondering, well, what the hell has the dragon got to do with recovery? That's what it has to do with recovery.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbology, and we'll be asking people for a call to action. And once we get the rest of the websites open and all that stuff, it's going to be some emails to come in and ideas and what a symbol like that would mean. Or so, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. So we're super excited. We're going to be asking the audience to come up with a name for our little jails, institutions, and death guy. We don't have a name for him yet, but he definitely has a lot of symbology, and we have a lot of ideas coming up. So sometimes he'll be in the jail, sometimes he'll be walking around, and there we go.
Dude,
So
I remember when I was getting loaded, and I was afraid to go to jail because I didn't want to kick in jail. I
right,
was afraid to just be without drugs,
yeah,
But at the same time, I also remember thinking, there's nowhere that you can put me that's going to be any worse than the place that I'm in right now
oh wow,
internally,
right,
And so that's just the mascot's just a great representation of
right.
that. It really is. Because you could have put me anywhere and it wouldn't have made wouldn't have made the situation any worse other than the fact that I wouldn't have drugs if that's where I ended up.
Right.
You know what and it was just so that's the condition I was in. If anything for some people, jail ends up becoming a breath of fresh air because it's
Amen on that.
yes,
So,
because and I know that you have a background
uh,
and you got a little story with that.
right,
Um, that ends up being the thing that potentially saves their life or at least stops them when they can't stop themselves.
right, right.
And so, but yeah, not an ideal place to be.
No,
Absolutely not. I'd rather
no,
be right here, right now, doing
that's right.
this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So definitely. So that's a little bit of the intro. I know you guys want to get to the meat and potatoes of recovery and everything. We just wanted to uh, kind of get you to know us a little bit more here on the second podcast. We didn't do that in the first one. That was a conscious decision that you guys would not be any separation or anything, and to just be a part of the family, whether you're an addict or not, or all of that. We said that in the first
The
podcast.
thing is, we didn't, our professional backgrounds and
Hmm.
the things that we share, like accolades and stuff like that. We didn't start out like that.
No,
That
absolutely
didn't,
not.
that didn't, I wasn't, one day clean with those accolades or
No,
any of that
no,
on my sheet.
absolutely not. So,
I had, and so if you're separating yourself when you hear that, just remember, um, it wasn't always like that.
no, absolutely not. So, yeah, it's been a lot of work and it's been really good. And I couldn't be happier with where I am right now and doing this stuff. So, we're going to jump right in here. Now, for what we talked about is the first one was barriers and bias and stigma, but we're going to talk about actually getting off of the fence and making it more black and white for you. And we're going to come in with the questions of Narcotics Anonymous. So just know that we're not in for separating for Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or anything, but we're going to do some of the questions so we can share and probably talk about this for a little while here because we can talk about these qualifications. Now, whether you're active addict or you're on the fence or seeing the light at the end of the tunnel coming down, and that's not you anything good. That's probably a train coming at you, but that you can see the light here, and we're going to do that. And what's on the screen here is, "Am I an addict?" And these are the questions that only you can answer this question. This
Mhm.
may not be an easy thing to do, although our usage, we told ourselves, "I can handle it." Even if this was true in the beginning, it is not so now. The drugs handled us. We lived in we lived to use and used to live. Very simply, an addict is a person whose life is controlled by
Yeah,
drugs.
it's important to point out that we reiterate throughout this podcast that we're not representing Narcotics Anonymous. We're not representing
Mhm,
Alcoholics Anonymous. We're here to educate people on 12-step programs because we see a need for education. And so this is just another one of those ways that we're educating.
mhm.
And when you walk into a room of Narcotics Anonymous, you can expect to see a little rack of pamphlets. One of the pamphlets that's going to be in that rack is going to be the "Am I an Addict" rack or "Am I an Addict" pamphlet.
Mhm.
And what it's designed to do is give you a series of questions, very simple questions, and you either check them yes or no. And it's designed to give you an idea to help you decide if you're an addict or not. And it sounds almost because I think about when I came in, I knew for 1,000% I was an addict at that point. But there was a lot of years before that where I had the justification, I had the denial, I had the rationalization, I had all the bullshit that ran through my head that made me believe that I wasn't an addict, which again, that's the disease of addiction that makes me think that way. And so what this is designed to do is to kind of like give you some clarity to sort through your own bullshit and hopefully give you some concrete answers. So that way you can decide for yourself if you're an addict or not. Because Brett couldn't, when I came in, Brett couldn't tell me that I'm an addict. You know, Solomon couldn't tell me that I'm an addict. Um, I could have the whole world telling me that I'm an addict, and until I believe and then accept that that's what I am, then I can't be helped. And so this is like very important stuff. This is first step stuff right here.
Right.
And really, what these questions are is if you look at them, uh,
Yeah, go ahead and
for
read that second part of this paragraph
sec-
at the top. Yeah.
second, okay, perhaps you admit you have a problem with drugs, but you don't consider yourself an addict. All of us have preconceived ideas about what an addict is. There is nothing shameful about being an addict once you begin to take positive action. If you can identify with our problems, you may be able to identify with our solution. The following questions were written by recovering addicts in Narcotics Anonymous. If you have doubts about whether or not you're an addict, take a few moments to read the questions below and answer them as honestly as you can. So, if you just kind of brush over these questions, what they're really talking about, what they're touching on is powerlessness and unmanageability. Those are the key components to addiction. And those also tie right in with the first step.
Mhm.
So
Right. So let's go down right here. We'll do the first. There's actually, I believe, 26 questions on this one. They have different ones that are 10, 12, and 20 AA, NA, and a lot of different areas where you can find these checklists. So
is
let's
this
do the
one
first one. Yeah.
26 or is it 12?
I think it's 26, but
Oh.
It goes down.
It's
like
definitely
2 or
more
3
than
pages.
12.
How
Oh, it's
much?
definitely more than
Definitely more than
12?
12, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Oh, yeah,
cool.
definitely. Yeah. So first one is, do you ever use alone? Yes or no. Number 2, have you ever substituted one drug for another, thinking that one particular drug was the problem?
Check.
Bam. So this one, I love when NA came out, and I was definitely doing meetings in the other program, and then NA come out and said, "Well, what about alcohol for the drug addicts?"
Mm,
And the truth is that alcohol is a drug. It's a central nervous system depressant.
1,000.
So still today, in treatment and everywhere we go, we'll go over their alcoholic's history, and then I'll ask them, "Are you using any other drugs?" And their knee jerk reaction is, "I don't use drugs."
Oh, they don't like to hear that.
And it's
Yeah.
like, "Yes, you do." And I like to kind of soul punch them real quick. And it's like, well, alcohol's a drug. It's a central nervous system depressant.
Yeah.
So
Can
if you're
equate it. You
on,
can equate that to Xanax. I mean,
yeah,
really.
exactly. We're talking about powdered alcohol and the
Yeah.
Xanax, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
going to be a whole nother podcast going down the
Oh, for
different
sure. Yeah.
various drugs and what will kick off that. So number 3, have you ever manipulated or lied to a doctor to obtain prescription drugs? Hmm. Number 4, have you ever stolen drugs or stolen to obtain drugs? Hmm. Do you regularly use a drug when you wake up or when you go to bed? Hmm. Number 6, have you ever taken one drug to overcome the effects of another? Number 7, do you avoid people or places that do not approve of you using drugs?
All of
No.
these are just unmanageability right here.
Yeah. Number 8, have you ever used a drug without knowing what it was or what it would do to you? Talk about a smack dab right in the middle of this new age in drug use.
Mm.
If we can move on to the next ones, we got 9 through 20 here. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but go ahead and read some more here, Rich.
Okay. So one of my favorites. Have you ever tried to stop or control your using? So that's, I mean, that's probably one of the easiest ones to answer.
Mhm.
Um, does the thought of running out of drugs terrify you? Absolutely, it sure did. Sure did, because I was going to be like a raw nerve and
Right.
very, very uncomfortable in my skin, and not just because of detox. I'm talking getting after detox.
Oh,
I didn't know what to do with my hands. I didn't know how to have a conversation. I was like a feral animal,
right.
socially inept after living that way for so long,
Right.
feeling like a feral animal, having to relearn how to
Mm,
coexist with other people in
right.
society. So that's for me. For me, that was why that question was so terrifying, because I just didn't know who I was without them. They were part of my identity. They were part of who I was. So yeah,
Yeah, with the
this is
high
a great.
powered opiates, it's not a question whether you're using or not today. It's a question of you got to get something because the fear of getting sick from how sick you already are is just this crazy mind
It's
blowing
so powerful. It is
process. It's
so
like I'm
powerful.
so afraid of getting sick, I can't get sick, but you're so sick anyways, and it's not you're gonna lie, cheat, thief, steal, do whatever it takes.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So that's pretty much what that pamphlet is. And so, you can find these on the NA website. You can, better yet, you can find them
Mhm.
in a room of Narcotics Anonymous if you just want to show up to a meeting. That's
Well, we
what I
got some more up
recommend.
here too. Has using affected your sexual relationships? Have you had irrational or indefinable fears? Do you think a lot about drugs? A lot of them are all tied in, of course, but they could keep going on and
Here's
on.
one anybody can relate to. Do you continue to use despite negative consequences?
Oh
Hey, it doesn't have to be you went to jail or that you got a
man.
DUI or that you
Hmm.
overdosed. It can be maybe your relationships are suffering. Maybe you don't show up to work all the time if you don't have something to get you there in the morning. Um, it could be. You can find
There's
many things.
yes.
Do you not brush your teeth in the morning? Hey, that's a negative
Yeah,
consequence.
yeah,
That's a negative consequence, and that's unmanageability, and that kind of stuff is also important to look at, besides the big stuff.
yeah, right. And there's just so much right here that goes on with this. And I like how it ends right here. It says, "Am I an addict?" This is a question only you can answer. We found that we all answer different numbers of these questions. Yes. The actual number of yes responses wasn't as important as how we felt inside and how addiction has affected our lives. Some of these
Mm,
questions don't even mention drugs. This is because addiction is an insidious disease that affects all areas of our lives, even those areas which seem at first to have little to do with drugs. The different drugs we used were not as important as why we used them and what they did to
damn. What a fire pamphlet,
us.
because you get to the end and you're like, all right, well, I answered some yes and some no. And then they're like, well,
And I
doesn't
think
have as
there's
much to do with the yes. It has more to do with the fact of you had to touch it. You had to tap in with yourself
mhm,
while answering these questions. And that's like the most important thing because again, dis- addiction is a disease of distorted thought. And so by answering these questions, you're kind of just left with real answers.
right. So
And,
this is yes or no stuff right here. Not
yes.
maybe so. No gray area on the yes or no. And this is like an easy thing for us to start practicing honesty with where we're at and how things are.
And you might not even be honest with most of them. Like you can still bullshit your way through some of these.
Yeah.
Drugs haven't affected my sexual relationships. I've never overdosed.
Yeah,
Got
but
Narcaned. Got Narcaned, but
yeah.
said that, oh, dude, like you guys Narcaned me. You guys should have never Narcaned me. I was just high.
Yeah.
I didn't die.
Yeah. I'm just faded, bro. My respirations were at like 3.
Pissed
You know
off
what
at
I
the
mean?
paramedics. Yeah, I never overdosed.
Is there a little bit more to this, Solomon, I think, on the end? Or was that the it? Because I think
Let's
it
see.
does. All right. So I think there's a little bit more of this. Hold on one second. When we first read these questions, it was frightening for us to think we might be addicts. Some of us tried to dismiss these thoughts by saying, oh, those questions don't make sense. Or I'm different. I know I take drugs, but I'm not an addict. I have real emotional family job problems. Or I'm just having a tough time getting it together right now. Or I'll be able to stop when I find the right person or the right job, etc. So if you're an addict, you must first admit that you have a problem with drugs before any progress can be made toward recovery. So this one keeps going on. And I know if there's a little bit more to it, it was talking about that it had an algorithm for how many yeses that you answered to. So it was like 2 or 3 was like, yeah. But then when you start getting up to 4 to 8, then it's like, oh, you are in the red zone.
They actually had this. They had this. I remember when I was in treatment one time. They had this questionnaire that we answered in treatment,
Uh-huh.
and it was sort of like this, but it was more of a it was like science based,
Right.
and it put you in different categories of how far your addiction had progressed. So there
Mhm.
was like mild addiction, moderate addiction, and severe addiction. I'm 19 years old,
Oh,
and mine's
great.
like severe addiction.
Right.
And it was like I think it was like 30 or 40 questions,
Mhm.
and it you put it in a scantron, and
Oh,
then
a
it gives
great
you and it gives you a
scantron.
feed it gives you
Oh, man.
it gives you the feedback. And I'm like, damn, severe addiction. And then I remember being kind of proud of it.
Yeah.
What an
Oh,
idiot. You know what I
absolutely.
mean? That goes to show you that was part of my identity
Right.
because I thought I
Oh,
was
for
more
sure.
badass at that point.
For
So
sure. It's
just
definitely, it becomes an all-encompassing for me. That there was a lot of rebellion towards that too with me and my crew and a lot of that stuff growing up in the 80s. Um, and moving into the 90s, it was just one big, giant, huge party. So there was a lot of us and them kind of
yeah,
scenario
yeah.
for sure going on. So, but that's a whole nother story of my background a little bit. We will elude our backgrounds and our stories and they'll come out organically.
Yours would have said severe addiction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There
Oh
was
yeah,
no doubt.
yeah,
At
yeah,
least I didn't have that barrier
yeah.
for me to say that I was an alcoholic and addict even in high school. I mean, that was very apparent,
Did
very
you did
true.
you when so were you kind of like proud to say it in a way? Were
I
you kind
was.
of
I was
yeah, I
it.
was gonna say because there's some people are like that, and then some people want to hide that part of
Right.
themselves and
And
never
I
admit
have
it.
friends like that too.
Yeah,
But we knew. They
but you
knew.
guys were like, you guys
Just
were like,
hanging around us was just
I was gonna say, you guys were like,
absolute
fuck yeah, like
110%.
I love to get high,
Uh-huh. That's
I
what it
love to get
was.
drunk.
We had
This
the
is what I do.
apparel,
This is part of who I am.
the
Big
music,
time identity
everything.
crisis.
It
Yeah.
was, yeah, it wasn't anything like that. My hair had gotten long. I have I'm a hardcore punker. all that kind of stuff. And all of that was encompassed with that process through my brother's neighborhood, going to shows. There was a lot of division back then also, as we're kind of segueing into a little bit of our story. But yeah, it was all separation by music back then.
Mm.
So if you were into Madonna, or you were kind of like into that, and then there was the ska people, then there was the other kind of party music people, the Beastie Boys and New Wavers, and they all kind of hung out in their crowd. And I was with the punkers and the thrashers and the partiers or the rockers. So that was kind of like that huge scenario. You could see all the different groups when I went to school and stuff. Nowadays, I love it because you can be into everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to be into everything and listen to everything. It's
Oh
really,
yeah. That's common. That's
Yeah.
very common now. Do you feel like that having that as part of your identity, do you feel like that made it easier for you to get sober than it would have been for somebody who was um like ashamed of being an addict?
yeah, it
Like
made it
easier for you to admit.
Oh yeah, I was never in denial about that aspect. So doing this questionnaire, and when I
Almost
did,
you didn't even have to do the questionnaire.
no,
I mean,
I
I
was
wouldn't have
100.
had I wouldn't have had to do it either.
I started crushing tests in the beginning.
I was gonna say there was probably at some point within my using that the questionnaire would have been helpful for me.
Mhm.
Um, but it seems like for you, you would have never needed it because you were already like you embraced that was a part of who you were,
Right.
you know. And
Right.
so if that's you, then maybe you don't need the pamphlet. You can just come to a meeting.
Exactly. We can, that's a part of this, what we're doing here, though, when we'll be segueing into the next topic and many other topics of what we're doing is to fast forward the process of you getting help and to stop killing yourself. I mean, the disease is definitely evolved
Mm.
with the high powered opiates, the opioid crisis going on, the ability for you to get drugs, to order it on the internet, get it from India. And if you don't know about this stuff, I hope I'm not hooking you up with new information that you can
They'll
start
find
jumping on it.
they would find it anyways.
Yeah,
They don't
it's
need your
already
help.
all there.
They want to get high, they'll get high.
Working in treatment for all the people out there, all the people on the front line on it, all the people that are working on helping this stuff. It's gone to this evolution of just, it's unbelievable. I don't even know what the next evolutionary process for it is. They're talking about new drugs coming out like Trank and other things. I remember there was a crocodile thing going on
Oh,
through
yeah.
Europe, and just eat your flesh away, and the high powered opiates.
I heard something recently about some other thing like
Mhm.
that. It's like a synthetic, or it's
Mhm.
like a fentanyl or something that
Right.
people
It's
are
the,
like
the
some
Trank. I
high
think that
powered.
was
Oh
heard of.
yeah, something like that. And it
Mhm.
also is like flesh eating
Mhm.
or something. And it's like hey, if that doesn't tell you the power of addiction right there, like I'm just gonna go ahead and shoot my arm off and
Yeah.
watch it fall off, and then I'm gonna go to the other arm and let that arm fall
Mhm.
off. That's heavy shit right there.
Yeah, it's so next level now. So a lot of the buzz stuff in recovery now is, oh well, you got another relapse in you, or the stuff, and it's like now, it's like maybe you don't,
Mm. Oh
because
no,
they're putting it in
oh no.
everything.
Yeah,
So the fentanyl's in
I
everything.
lost a buddy 3 days ago. I
Right,
probably lose one a week. Somebody that I know, or
right,
at least somebody I've met
right,
one time.
right.
Sometimes it's a little closer to
And those
home.
aren't usually. It can be in anything. So if the public isn't aware of what's going on, and it's kind of maybe I can get really passionate and fireside of where the information is coming from and how much on a higher level it is not televised or talked about. But we're going to be, it's like what we shared on the last podcast. It's always for the people and by the people in recovery.
Mm.
So, of course, there's other help and all that. But we are here now letting you know that the stakes are high. You can be smoking some weed now. Been hearing that in meetings lately, and the fentanyl's in the weed. And I used to been joking about for years that there's going to be a new fentanyl IPA that comes out. So
I mean,
it'll
it's
be in your
everywhere. I mean,
alcohol.
it's everywhere. I heard about there was the two couples.
Mhm.
Uh, People had money, Newport Beach couples,
Right. Oh
and
yeah.
they went on a double date, and then they went and hit up a guy in Costa Mesa.
Hmm.
Went to go get some cocaine to finish their night
Oh
off.
yeah. It's
Right?
in the coke.
Probably not. Yeah. I mean, these people were probably not even addicts necessarily. Maybe they could have been. I don't know. They were probably just some normal people who wanted to snort a line of coke that night, and have some fun, right?
Some sexual experience.
Whatever, right?
One of those questions.
Probably. And they found them the next morning, all 4 of them dead in Newport Beach in the house. And it's like, I mean, it's,
there's that story
I'm just
too
so
about the
grateful that I'm out of the
comedians, too.
game.
About the comedians. It was like
Some
3 out of
comedians.
40 and 3 out of 4 of them were OD'd and died doing coke too.
It's nuts, man. It's terrorism is what it is. But I don't even want to, I could go down a rabbit hole with that. But
we'll be touching
crazy.
on all these things. But today is what we wanted to do was some foundational things. And of course, we can go on tangents.
Mm-hmm.
We can keep flowing forever because F3 recovery is talking about turning fight, flight, and freeze into free, form, and flowing.
Oof.
So
Say
that's
that
what
10
we're doing.
times fast.
Yeah, fight, flight, and freeze.
My man's rapping.
Yeah, into free form and flowing. So that's what the F3 stands for, and you'll see that on the outro. So
can we touch on self-diagnosing real quick?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Just we talked about the pamphlet, but I think it's so important to talk about self-diagnosing because I got to reiterate that it doesn't matter who around you tells you that you're an addict or even that you say out loud you're an addict. Because you can say out loud that you're an addict and not truly believe it. And so then you can come into recovery and you can work all the steps and do all the stuff, but it's like building a house on like a sand foundation.
Right.
Because there's that reservation there deep down in your heart where you don't fully believe that you belong in recovery because you still think that maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not an addict. Maybe it was maybe I was just doing too much. Maybe it was just a round of bad luck. Maybe it was just circumstances. Maybe it was all of these different things.
Crowd.
Yeah, and so that's why it's so important.
Or if you grew up in my environment, you'd be an addict too.
Yes. All of that stuff.
We'll change you.
All of that stuff.
We'll move to a different place.
The key is just understanding in your heart and fully believing that you are an addict and that you belong in recovery and being clean and or else you're fucked pretty much. And so super important. Super important because if not, I believe that your recovery is on shaky ground, and then that's from experience from myself because I came in and I tried to do things. I tried to do the program and then I was like, one day I'm like, well, it's, maybe it was there was that question about maybe it was just this substance. So now I was clean off heroin. So I'm going to go back and maybe try to smoke weed again.
Yeah, we were touching on that.
Yeah. And so it was like, dude, I remember one night I had 60 days out of rehab. I was clean for 60 days. I got around a buddy. I took 11 p.m. that night. I took a drink of tequila. Okay. I took a drink. One drink turned into two. 2 drinks turned into me trying to fight everybody at the party. 6 a.m. the
real rich emerges.
6 a.m. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I had a needle in my arm again. And so I had to go through what I had to go through to get there. But at the end of the day, the moral of that story is that for me, even though I was going to meetings, even though I was trying to do the things that I needed to do in recovery, I hadn't fully conceded to my inner self that I 1,000% belonged there. And that this is the way of life that I have to live in order for me to be my best self. And there was no other way for me. And so that's the whole point of self-diagnosing.
Right.
Everybody around you can say it. You can even lie to yourself and say it. But until you truly, truly believe that that's what it is, then you'll be building a foundation of recovery on, shaky foundation. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that's a full circle on that subject with that. Coming back to in our literatures, it can say, well, go to the bar and try to do some more controlled drinking and see where that takes you. Now that we got, for the family members out there that are wondering if their kids are on the fence or not, we got a a good 26 questions of signs and symptoms of where this road can end at.
That's true. That's awesome. That's a good point.
Mhm.
That's a good pamphlet for the
We
family
got the
members.
signs and symptoms, we have it going on, and we reiterated like on the last one, um, about where we were going with the self-diagnosing, and then how we can really see where we're at in our life at this point. So what does it look like when we go into our next subject right here, which is going to be practice and action in recovery? So what does it look like when we first get into recovery? The truth is that the only way to get rid of old habits is to get new habits. So when we come into recovery, we're going to be calling you to action right off the spot. So what kind of routine do you have? So when we work into the program, your sponsor is usually gonna give you some stuff to do, and we're gonna ask you to go out and help another person. We don't wait for you to, oh, well, I'm gonna go to 30 meetings and then I'm gonna start doing things or I'm gonna feel it out. When you get into recovery, it's important to have a routine. So if we don't get a new routine, and it's basically kind of broken down into new coping skills of life. The 12 steps are a set of coping skills. If you apply your new life in the program with your old set of coping skills, it will fail. It was failing before you got into recovery. So a lot of people come in and they don't practice all 12 steps or start uploading new coping skills. It's as easy as thinking about problem, intervention, and evaluation. So upon awakening, when we do, there's a whole science to it. We'll get into it later on. When you wake up, before you do anything else, a lot of us in the program, we grab our routine. So we perfect our day. And right here on one of these is page 86, which is a very important one that you'll find in AA. So a lot of people will say, I woke up this morning, I read pages 60 to 63, went 85 through 89. I did 417, and that was the acceptance prayer. I learned the third and seventh step prayer. I went out the door with "Thy will be done," and this process right here doesn't have to be long. So when I left my last treatment center, I had 90 days of practicing my new skills, my new routine of life in the morning and then throughout the day. So as we go down in here into this second paragraph, this is what I do in the morning. I have my same routine at my bedside, and I did this for years. Of course, my program has taken me in different routes of morning routines. So let's just do this one right here. It says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self pity, dishonest, or self seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers will come after we have tried this for a while. So, on these two ones right here, I know there could be an immediate separation process with talking about God, but we had to definitively give at least a general blanket name. So, when I first started, God was not God for me, it was good, orderly direction. So for me, this became good, orderly direction. And of course, over 20 years of practicing and doing things, it's definitely evolved in the way of my spirituality. But this one, right off the bat, right here, it's before you get into the day that there's a science behind it. And I can get into that right now. I don't know if I want to.
Theta?
Huh?
Theta.
Exactly. So we're going to do the four different brain levels of energy, vibration, and frequency. So when you're in deep sleep, you're in delta. So when you're first waking up, you're in theta. Theta is where you can reprogram the subconscious. That is when you are basically still out of the way. So you're kind of groggy, you're just waking up. So when does it tell you? So the program knew all of this stuff before science had come out with it. And there's been a lot of progressions about that. And we'll get into that in later episodes. So it's not saying, get out of bed, get some coffee. It's not saying get out of bed and get in your head. It's talking about upon awakening. when you're still vacillating between theta and beta, all right? And that no alpha. So it goes the five wavelengths goes delta, then you come into theta, which is just before you get into consciousness. Then it goes alpha and then beta. Right now we're talking and we're vibrating in beta. But some of us, and then higher states would be gamma. So you got those 5 different levels. So the program already knows that the best way to reprogram is either through practice, which is repetition, because repetition is the mother of all learning. You'll hear these different things. And then actually going into this theta area right here, which is like kind of where you can be in hypnosis, where they can do hypnotic therapy on people. And it's really, there's a lot of great people out there teaching that. And this isn't new stuff. This is very old, and people have a lot of scientists behind
I
it.
love it too because, we're science guys.
Yeah.
We're in nursing. You're a
Mhm.
nurse. I'm in
Mhm.
nursing school. We're science people.
Mhm.
And so I love being able to bridge the gap between spirituality and science
Right.
and connect the two.
Huge on it.
Because that's very important for me because my brain will pick shit apart
Yeah, that's right.
if I don't have some concrete answers. And so when you told me about theta,
Uh-huh.
and then you were like, and then you talked about how and then I'm thinking about how the program talks about doing everything at night
Mhm.
before bed or in the
Mhm.
morning.
Right.
We're in theta right before bed, and we're in theta right after
As
we
we're
wake up.
ramping down.
Yeah.
So as
And
we ramped up, we also ramped down. So we'll go moving backwards from beta, alpha to theta into delta when to deep
so
sleep.
that's the best. So theta's the point in which we're the most malleable, pretty
Right.
much.
We're mostly out of the way.
Right.
Because I mean, who's in the way of mostly everything in our life that's good
Me.
is us. So let's just take the me factor out of it. So then, right in here, because we're going to segue into some cliches and sayings and quotes here in a little bit, because we're moving along in this podcast. So let's go to the second one. Okay. So when we retire at
Oh,
night,
okay. Yeah, I see
paragraph
that
2
one. Yeah.
right here. When we retire at night. Okay. So after we've gone through our day, this is basically what 10 step is stuff. And I know this is 11th step, but everything is integrated. We're not asking you to not, a day well lived, as Bill W. would say, is a day that you've applied all 12 steps to your life without even really thinking about it. You've done it in this area, okay? So when we retire at night, it says right here, we can reconstructively review our day. This is where we're going to do a checklist here, guys. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Oh man, come on. Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving towards all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Yeah. Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful. This is the important one. This is the huge one right here. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Like early recovery. I needed to read that like
Right.
every day
Right.
because
Oh.
I was only equipped with my same thinking that I came in with.
Right.
And none of it involved being loving or forgiving or was I an ass or was I selfish or any of that. I didn't have that way of thinking when I came in. I had an drug addict way of
Right.
thinking, just minus the drugs for a couple days.
Gimme.
And then so this over time has become just now part of the way I think. It's
Right.
just now part of how I
Mhm.
think. For the most part, there's still old Rich that pops up.
Right.
But it becomes a part of who you are through repetition. And one of my favorite sayings is the stream of life saying.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why that always
Packing into
dude,
the stream of life.
that always maybe because I love fishing.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
love fly fishing. So
Exactly.
I love anytime we're talking about streams,
Oh yeah.
I'm all about it.
All right. Don't
But
go chasing waterfalls.
but that's always been one of my favorite things is like, and I'm just I find myself just so grateful to be a part of the stream of life.
Right.
Because if anything, I think of addiction and I think of the condition that I was in, and I remember and it felt like I was so outside I was like on the outside of the stream of life looking
Right.
in and wondering what it was like, and so such an awesome thing. And to go for the God thing, I still don't like the word God, if I'm completely honest. I don't like
Mhm.
it. I say higher power, even higher power I kind
Mhm.
of struggle with.
Mhm.
I don't really know why that is. I just don't like it. Uh, and I mean, who knows why? But a lot of people don't like that word. And so that's okay. I'm still in recovery. I'm
Yeah.
still able to practice all of this stuff that I'm reading,
Right.
and I don't have to like the word. And
Right.
so don't let if you're hearing the word and you're going like and it's making you super uncomfortable, don't let that be the reason that you don't move forward in recovery, or if you're thinking about doing
Right.
12-step program, don't let that be the reason, because that's trust. That's the least of your worries.
Right.
That should be the least of your issues, because there's a million ways to navigate that.
Right. Yeah. I'm not. We're not looking for separation. The program's never talking about separation at all. We want all brothers and sisters, all race, color, and creed, everybody to come about, and that's what the new movement is going on, anyways, across the planet. Society will teach you all the separation. We'll give you all the labels. We'll give you all the zip codes and phone numbers and dividing lines and barriers across the planet. And they'll tell
Borders,
you, yeah,
race.
yeah, all that stuff. They'll tell you that a Muslim woman doesn't love her child as much as a Christian woman, and all these different things. And if it wasn't for me to open my heart and to give a moment to read these things and drop it from my mind to my heart and to where I live now, I would have never gotten here. I mean, my religious upbringing was all, if your grandmother asks you if you believe in God, you just tell her yes. That was it. So, so of course, I moved into a lot of different things, but at least my parents, I was super blessed to have parents to let me have an open mind.
Yeah.
So I became very close minded to a lot of different things. So all we're asking for you as we move into the next one, which is a very big liberating one. This one's called the acceptance prayer. So this is another one. This is one liberated and to save my life right here. I was in fight, flight, and freeze at whatever level, and I was in fighting everything my senses could fight. Uh, and I came in, and then they dropped this one on me. And this one's the acceptance prayer, 417, paragraph 2. And this was written by Dr. Paul, who was a gnarly addict. If you haven't read that story in the back, even if you're an addict or not, if you haven't read it, it's super entertaining. And he ended up writing one of the most powerful ones, in my opinion. And this one's acceptance. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. All my problems today. And it's underlined on all. When I'm disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I accept myself, my situation, and my life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what happens in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes. So if you haven't read this one, or if you've been in recovery for a long time and you don't know about it, because you're never going to know everything, but this is a very powerful one for me. And that's why I brought it up. We're not waiting for you to practice all 12 steps to get to stuff that you're going to see on step 11 or step 3 or 2 or 1, or the meat and potatoes on 6 and 7 and roll into 8 and 9. I mean, oh yeah, what an order. I can't go through it. It's too much to do. We're not asking you to do it all at once here. We're asking you to get a routine. So if you don't have a routine, we already know your old routine. If you will always default back to the old you if you don't start building the new you. This is all about living in today and moving forward. So right here for me, they'll go, well, how can I be accepting of all this stuff? Just because you're accepting doesn't mean that you condone what's happening. You just got to be in acceptance. And
Yeah.
the first one you'll hear on this one for a lot of hardcore homies is all, how could I accept the molesters and all these different things? And it's like, this is something that you don't condone, but it's happening. But
Yeah, right. You just stop holding on to it.
yeah,
You just stop holding on to it, because guess who suffers? You suffer,
yeah,
you know?
this is
You're
something that will
suffering.
keep us away from being our best selves.
Absolutely. I was thinking about I was thinking about this guy right here,
Yeah,
and
yeah, of course.
I'm thinking about acceptance, and I'm thinking about people I know who have been in prison
Mm-hmm.
and in the program. Like
Oh yeah.
they got clean, and then they ended
Mm-hmm.
up going like having a court date or whatever, and
Yeah.
then they get locked up,
Yeah.
and they're in there for a couple years, and I'm like thinking like I'm thinking of this acceptance piece, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going, you know, I bet you there's people sitting right now in a prison cell,
Mm-hmm.
and they're happier than some of the people listening to this thing right now because they fully accepted their situation. And so you can do whatever you got to do in their external environment. Whatever's going on in their external environment could be what it is. You could even say the same thing for somebody who's out there homeless right now.
Right.
External environment looks like it sucks, but because they've 110% accepted
Right.
their situation
Right.
and what's going on, they're okay.
Right.
And they're better than some of us sitting in their living room right now,
Absolutely.
you know, with everything that they could ask for.
And
And
suffering all
but
of
inside,
it.
you know. And so just some perspective, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. The podcast has gone by pretty quick right here. How much more time do we got here, Solomon?
Looks about at 7 minutes.
All right. Well, let's go into the last thing. We're going to include our first fun snippet here because we could talk about acceptance and all that stuff for like ever. So, and the early morning practice and what we do. So, it's going to be an ongoing process. And I know Jared has some super cool stuff to share on that when I had met him and he started sharing his meditation process and all that stuff. So, we definitely want him to share some of his experience, strength, and hope on that. Super powerful. So we're going to segue into our first snippet right here. Go ahead and hit it, Solomon. It's now time for cliches, quotes, and sayings in recovery.
Yeah, baby.
All right. So definitely when you get into the program or maybe just in life, you got some really fun things that you like to say because we all have a bunch of cliches, quotes, and sayings, right? You're going to hear it. So what's the most famous one right here? We'll lead in it with this one, Rich. What do you think?
The most famous one? Oh,
Yeah.
one day at a time.
One
Absolutely.
day at a time. Let's
One
talk
day at a
about that
time.
one.
One day at a time. So, you
I
hear
hated
this a
this
lot.
one.
I mean,
I hated this saying when I first got in.
yeah. I mean, one day at a time. So we stay clean one day at a time. So we talk
Mhm.
about a 24-hour reprieve. We have
Right.
we wake up when we wake up in the morning. We have an opportunity to make a decision for that day, uh, to take it one day at a time. Because getting clean for most of us is terrifying. How can I do this the rest of my life?
Mhm.
And that's daunting. So, you know, the old saying, what is it? How do you eat a horse one bite at a time?
Yeah.
I don't know why the hell
Yeah.
it's a horse.
How do you eat a lion?
That shit's
How
weird,
does the
you know.
ant devour a tiger?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna eat a horse, but one bite at a time, pretty much. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to break it down to
Right.
make it less scary, to
Mhm.
make it easier on ourselves. So we take it one day at a time. Sometimes we take it one moment at a time, 1 minute at a time.
Right.
I gotta say this, one day at a time now for me is just
Mhm.
autopilot. I don't have to choose to do it.
Right.
I just wake up and I stay clean because it's the way I live now.
Right.
It's a lifestyle. Now, that's 99% of the time. When life gets rough and bad things happen in my life and then I start to feel feelings, then I might be back to one moment at a time. I might be back to one day at a time,
Right. Mhm.
grinding it out. You
Right.
know, most of the time it's not like that today.
Right.
But that's where that saying has come from for me, and
Right.
that's kind of my interpretation of it.
Right.
Do you have a different
Oh yeah, I
interpretation?
got
Or? There's a bunch of different interpretations. You could use it
it's
for
basically. I mean, you can't have a wrong interpretation, but most of the time, people live their whole lives never being where they are, never wanting to be. I mean, we can time travel all the time, and like what we shared in the early morning one right here, not drifting into worry and morbid reflection, being conscious of what we're being conscious of. It's time to start thinking about what we're thinking about to make a delineation, a separation of who we were and what we want to become, perfecting our day one day at a time. How am I going to set up my day? I'm intentionally making my new life here. So, I mean, we a
making the
lot of
most out of the
yeah,
24 hours that I
exactly.
get,
And
right?
then I'm wrapping it up, and a lot of people do spot check inventories, and there's checklists and all these things. But one day at a time, I had to do it. So someone, as I relapsed for my first 3 years in the program, someone said, you know what, Brett, you need to stop counting the days and start making the days count. And that one hit me.
That's another little
That one
cliche
hit
right
me.
there.
And
That's
I'm
another
getting
quote.
chills talking about it because it really slowed me down. And it's like, yeah, you can do your 30, 60, and 90 days and have all these things in 6 months and then get through it. But it was like, what was I doing in that day? Because change and everything happens in the moment, on the moment. The work that we're putting in today, we will see the results further down the line and sometimes in the day.
You can also have 10 years clean and have less recovery than somebody
Yeah.
who has 30 days clean.
Right, right.
Recovery, time doesn't equal recovery.
Right. They say that having too many years and not enough days.
Look at that, man. We're just out here spitting all
Bang,
the
bang,
quotes right
boom,
now. Look at
boom.
that.
So
And they're all related.
and yeah. So for me, one day at a time that's the only place you can live is now. So there's so much awesome collateral literature on that one from other great thinkers and stuff. And the next one I wanted to touch on really quick was one, I don't know where I got it from, but this one is under promise and over provide.
Oof. Nice.
So we are such grandiose people. Oh my gosh. So under promising and over provide, if you keep this in your repertoire, in your tool shed, in your toolbox, or whatever you got, or your Granger flipping catalog, whatever metaphor you want to use, this one will always keep you in a safe place.
That almost sounds like a nursing, something I would see in a nursing.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a nursing thing.
Yeah.
Because we're taught not to promise the patient anything.
Right.
We'll do our best.
Right.
We don't promise.
Well, what time's the doctor going to be here?
Yeah. We don't promise
ever say
anything.
that.
Yeah. We don't give them any concrete answers, but we do try to over provide.
That's where I'd love to be at. So I love to under promise and that is super important when we first get into recovery. And we can do a whole nother topic of that, which we will probably somewhere down the line. But we're coming down the line here and ending on another one. So I would like to call to action. We are uploading at these times up to different social media platforms and different streaming services, Spotify. We're going to be on everywhere. So we would like you to share and also subscribe and download all those kind of things like this. And if you like the information, it's definitely going to be on f3recovery.org. We will be launching that website most likely with all the emails and everything this week. So just know that we are creating more content. We have a whole bunch of ideas, and thanks for meeting our mascot. And thanks again, Rich, for doing another Super Sober podcast. And we hope that you love it. And we're going to be out here doing it again and keep on keeping on, right?
One more thing before we go.
Let's do it.
One more quote. Grateful people are happy people.
Right.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites.
And those that aren't, right?
And those that aren't. So get grateful, man. There's things to be grateful for. You can find them.
Oh, yeah.
One other one I heard is that correlates with that is when I'm grateful, I'm in reality.
Right. That's a good one.
When I'm not grateful, I'm living in some fantasy world that tells me everything is shit.
Yeah.
And it's just not the truth. So there's things to be grateful for, and you'll feel a lot better.
Yeah, we'll do a whole podcast on gratefulness.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's one of my favorite ones. So
it's been a great day. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Super Sober Podcast. Go to our website at f3recovery.org. That's F3Recovery, all one word, .org. We're turning fight, flight, and freeze into free form and flow through practicing the 12 steps and staying accountable to change. Don't forget to keep on keeping on.